Hi, everybody. My name is Andrew Gansenberg, and I wanted to talk a little bit about cooperatives today. So I was in my last semester at Green Mountain College studying sustainable business, and I wanted to learn more about democratic employee ownership. So after reaching out to some folks, I was connected with Vermont Employee Ownership Center, and Don Jameson and Matt Kropp over there were very kind to jump on board, really help me develop this course. And Matt has worked with me tirelessly over the last semester and been a really great resource. So I'm gonna try to share some of what I learned, and hopefully it will, I'll be able to teach you a little something today. So got a little presentation here. If I can pull that up. Alrighty. So, sorry, my computer is doing some strange things here. All right, so this will be just a pretty surface level introduction to cooperatives. We'll look at the types of cooperatives and the benefits of being a cooperative. Then we'll travel across the world to Spain and Italy to look at some areas where they have developed some very strong cooperative economies. And finally, we'll come back to the US and look at what we can do to build cooperative economies here in the United States. So first of all, what is a cooperative? Basically, they are all going to be membership organizations, and there are different types of co-ops, such as a consumer co-op. You may be familiar with food co-ops. This is basically where the customers will pay a membership fee and become then a part of the organization. There are also producer co-ops, such as Cabot here in Vermont. This is where the producers of the raw material become the members, in this case, farmers producing milk. Cabot is a great example of how these models of economies can create more resilient systems. A great example is when Hurricane Irene came through Vermont, a lot of our roads and infrastructure were destroyed, and some of these farmers could not get their milk to Cabot. While this was happening, the other farmers in Cabot were able to pick up some of that slack and continue paying these farmers so that they were able to continue running their farms. And in some other model, they may have not been able to do that and might have lost their entire livelihoods. There are also worker cooperatives, and this is really where I have spent most of my time this semester studying worker cooperatives. And this is, of course, where the employees are the members of the organization. So there are a few pieces that really define what a cooperative is. And of course, we've been talking a bit about membership. So in a worker cooperative, there's going to be some sort of eligibility to become a member. And that's usually going to be having worked at the business for a certain amount of time, the other employee owners agreeing that after that period of time that you are a good fit for the organization and would be a good employee owner. And each business will have their own specific eligibility requirements. Once you have met all of these requirements, you can then pay a membership fee to become a worker owner. This fee is usually large enough to make sure that the employee is really considering, is this an organization I really want to be part of in the long term? Is this a good fit for my life? Do I really want to invest my resources into it and have a stake in the success of this organization? With that being said, all employees that have met the eligibility requirements should be able to become employee owners, so the fee shouldn't be prohibitively expensive. One strategy to ensure this could be that a business offers the employees the ability to take some out of their paycheck over a period of time to pay this fee. Now, As members, cooperatives are also profit-sharing organizations with their members, and this profit sharing is based on patronage. So in a consumer co-op, that patronage is going to be how much money you have spent at the organization. In a producer co-op, it will be how much of that material you have produced and contributed to the organization. And as a worker co-op, patronage will be how many hours you have worked. So the profit sharing will be the same rate for a CEO or the lowest level worker that is still an employee owner, based on hours worked. This patronage in part will be paid out directly to the worker owner, and part of it, along with the membership fee, will go into an internal capital account within the business. These employees have this added benefit on top of their compensation, but also have responsibility if the organization is not doing well and has losses instead of profits. Those will then come out of these internal capital accounts. This isn't like a regular savings account where you can withdraw money at any time. This functions more as a retirement account that will be paid out when you leave the organization. These funds are still a part of the business and used by the business for their general operating expenses. So the final piece that really helps to define a cooperative is voting rights. All cooperatives, no matter what type, are going to be democratically governed organizations. They're going to work on a one member, one vote system to elect the board of directors and to vote on major decisions within the business. What makes a major decision is going to be defined again individually by each company's individual bylaws. So you'll notice that I said democratically governed. This is distinct from being a democratically managed company. Some cooperatives may also choose to be democratically managed, but could also have a very traditional vertical management structure with CEO, VP level, lower level managers, etc., all the way down. But in the spirit of democracy, many cooperatives do seem to have democratic management structures, whether that be total quality management to empower their lower level employees, or in smaller organizations, maybe even consensus decision-making structures built in. So obviously that's just a surface level introduction to what makes a cooperative, but hopefully you now have an idea of what we're working with as we move into a discussion of cooperative economies. Principle 6 of cooperatives put forth by the International Cooperative Alliance is cooperation among cooperatives. And in our 2 case studies today, the Mondragon Corporation in the Basque region of Spain, as well as the cooperatives in the Emilia-Romagna region of Italy, will very clearly demonstrate this principle of intercooperation. So Mondragon, the first cooperative in that region, was actually started up in 1956, but in 1959, Father Maria Arizmendi Arrieta created the Caja Laboral Popular. And this was a funding institution as well as offering technical business assistance to help cooperative startups get off the ground. These startups were not only required to profit share within the business, but share profits to the Caja. This meant that as the Caja funded more and more businesses, they were all helping to support the Caja, and then the Caja, of course, was able to offer more support to each individual business, creating this self-perpetuating cycle. Not only did they have profit sharing, but representatives from each of the businesses would be put in place in decision-making capacities within the Caja, creating a system of checks and balances. This created the primary level cooperatives that were funded by the Caja, and then the Caja as a secondary level cooperative within this federation of cooperatives that became known as the Mondragon Corporation. These cooperatives did not qualify for state health insurance or social security, and so as Mondragon grew, other secondary cooperatives were formed to supply these needs and further support the primary cooperatives. Mondragon has now grown into a very vast complex of cooperatives, 260 co-ops with almost 12 million euros in revenue in 2015. That encompasses entire chains of grocery stores that are consumer co-ops, university, technical and vocational schools, heavy manufacturing industry, as well as service industries, etc., all working together to create a healthy, thriving cooperative economy. Here are some of the principles that the Mondragon Corporation goes by. You'll see that staff actually moves between cooperatives, which helps build a sense of cohesion within them, as well as building communication structures. And you'll notice down at the bottom, there's no internal competition. This means that if a business is offering the same goods or services as a business that is already a part of Mondragon, then that business cannot become part of Mondragon. This makes it so all of the co-ops that are a part of Mondragon feel very comfortable with very open data, knowledge, and profit sharing, and really have a stake in the success of one another. So that is a great example from Spain, and now we're going to move over to Italy, and specifically the Emilia-Romagna region, which was formed in a very different manner. After World War II, their economy was really destroyed, and these small mom and pop shops were only able to figure out how to survive and rebuild the economy by working together. So what they ended up doing is finding these strategic alliances along a vertical value chain where, for example, maybe a butcher and a hide tanner and a leather worker would all come together to complete an entire value chain, making these businesses able to stay as small, cooperative, and autonomous businesses while creating economies of scale and becoming very successfully globally competitive. As these alliances of businesses increased, they also began developing secondary cooperatives, such as business centers offering innovation, R&D, industry and market research, etc., and financial consortia similar to the Caja. One major difference, or another major difference, between these two businesses or federations of cooperatives was that rather than in Mondragon, where there's the movement of staff between cooperatives, in the Emilia-Romagna region, it's a much more static system where management and board of directors will generally stay in their positions for a long time. To ensure that there isn't stagnation of innovation and ideas, however, these managers and board of directors will regularly have to come to the workers and defend what they are doing, their strategies, their ideas, etc. This keeps them really developing and building upon what they've already done. One really interesting piece that I found is that though this whole presentation has been about ownership, in the Emilia-Romagna region, members of these cooperatives don't think of themselves necessarily as owners as much as they think of themselves as stewards of the businesses. This is clearly portrayed in that if a business sells itself off, that profit does not go directly to the workers or the owners. It instead is distributed among the cooperatives in their alliance or federation. This may seem a little unfair on the surface, but it has two very important benefits for a cooperative economy. One is that these cooperative economies have such strong networks and links and inter-reliance on one another that if businesses were selling left and right, these links in the network would be breaking apart faster than they could be rebuilt. So having a disincentive to sell the business is very important to keep the strength of these networks. It also, by supporting monetarily all of the other businesses in their federation, creates a very strong economy so that these worker owners, once they have sold the business, have a very good opportunity to find another good job in the area. This has been so successful that the Emilia-Romagna region now has one of the lowest unemployment rates in all of Europe, as well as one of the highest standards of living. All right, so hopefully you can see the value of cooperative economies through these two examples. And so let's come back to the United States and consider how we can build cooperative economies here. I really would like to just reiterate the importance of primary and secondary level cooperatives supporting one another as one of the main strategies. Another big area that we need to focus on here is financing cooperatives. In the United States, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in this area. Cooperatives are designed not to be sold and not to have an IPO, pretty much ruling out any venture capital coming in. As our country doesn't have a great deal of cooperatives yet, a lot of banks are unfamiliar with how to build financing packages specifically for cooperatives. And so that's another area that is being worked on. And again, the International Cooperative Alliance has been working to improve this. They've recently released a document, The Lending Opportunity of a Generation, to help guide banks in working with cooperatives. But let's look at some other ways that cooperatives can be financed. Obviously, there are the membership fees that we talked about before, but that's only going to get us so far. There are also community fund institutions. Now, these are financial institutions that, rather than being secondary level cooperatives within a federation, are outside funding institutions. In the US, we have the Shared Capital Cooperative, and more regionally, we have the Cooperative Fund of New England as good examples of these community fund institutions. There's also the potential for revolving loans, and this is an area where cooperatives would be incentivized to create these strategic alliances and start building these collectives of cooperations that we were talking about before, and might even be one of the first pathways to start building secondary cooperatives by having representatives of this alliance come together to create an administering body for the revolving loans. So membership fees and the internal capital account and voting rights all come together to be considered as a Class A share. There's also the potential for Class B shares to be sold to fund cooperatives. And we were fortunate to have Dan Fireside, the capital coordinator at Equal Exchange, come and talk to us about some of what they're doing in this area, which is really some pretty innovative strategies, including investing some of their internal capital accounts in Class B shares so that those accounts also have growth beyond just the profit sharing. And then there's this tension of whether to have a direct public offering or not. Now, with a direct public offering, there's the ability to market these shares to a broad audience and to sell a great amount of them. And so there's some great advantages. However, it can also be very expensive to create a direct public offering. And as many cooperatives at least start out as very small organizations, sometimes that can be prohibitively expensive. There are some exemptions to be able to offer Class B shares without a direct public offering. However, there are many protections put in place for investors, which really limit the ability to advertise these Class B shares and how many can be sold, etc. Obviously, protections for investors that don't know what they're getting into are very important. So there's quite a bit of tension as to how to go about addressing this issue. It does seem like working with government to create legislation specific for cooperative Class B shares could be very helpful. One area that could go in is allowing co-ops to market their Class B shares to other co-ops who understand what they're getting into and also have that interest in the intercooperation and helping support one another. Along this line of intercooperation, Equal Exchange has been very successful offering their Class B shares in part because they have a long history of solid revenues and of giving out very steady dividends each year. However, young companies that do not have this history are going to look very risky to investors. And so one way that we could approach limiting that risk is offering funds of multiple cooperative companies Class B shares all together. This would allow young companies and more established companies such as Equal Exchange to offer their shares in one fund, limiting the risk and again allowing more of that intercooperation. So again, financing, definitely a lot of room for innovation and improvement in helping cooperative-led development. Another area that I think has a lot of room for improvement is in cooperative-specific strategy and strategic frameworks. So I've been really pushing the idea of primary and secondary cooperatives throughout this presentation. And so just to give you a taste of what a cooperative-specific strategic framework could look like, I have just begun developing one with a little inspiration from Porter's 5 Forces as to how we can build alliances and federations of cooperatives. So these can come from regional alliances or alliances within specific business sectors, and can start out with very small strategic alliances. And that could be a business looking to work more closely with its suppliers or its customers, or an alliance of cooperatives helping to fund new ventures, or work with NGOs and nonprofits to help convert businesses into worker-owned cooperatives, or such as in the Emilia-Romagna region, look for complementary products and services in other businesses that can work together. So hopefully I've given you enough of a taste of what cooperative strategic frameworks could look like, that it will inspire you to dig a little bit deeper into that, and in fact dig deeper into the cooperative movement in general. I just want to give a final thank you to Matt Kropp, as well as Dan Urban and the other Matt, who all really embodied the spirit of intercooperation by donating their time and their knowledge to help me learn this semester. And hopefully I will be able to make good use of that to help grow the cooperative movement into the future. So we're just gonna, we actually have Matt online with us right now. So I told him that after I did this, he could ask any clarifying questions or dig a little deeper into any areas. So I'm going to bring him back online here and see if he has anything to grill me on.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you, Andrew, and it's been fun working with you this semester. One you covered a lot of ground, and there's these various models, but really sort of deeply looking at the worker co-op model in particular. And I was wondering if as you were giving thought to the systems piece at the end, what your thoughts were kind of on if you had any, on the sort of relative kind of impact of different types of stakeholder co-ops, and if the worker and consumer and the relationships there, and if there's any particular things that you've been thinking about that would be either ways they work together or potential tensions that would make it more or less difficult to work together. Any thoughts on that?
Sure.
That piece?
So one part that pops up immediately is that to have a fully cohesive economy, you have to have the businesses as well as people purchasing things. So I think all of these models are very important to create a full cooperative economy. Part of my reason for being especially interested in the worker co-ops is just the idea of how much time we spend at work, and how much effort we put in, and building that community around the work we're doing, I think is very important, and really supporting the lifestyle and of each of these workers and their ability to I think as those worker co-ops grow, they're really planted in those communities. Again, they're not going to be sold off as easily, or outsourced overseas, etc. So I think it really helps to build stronger communities with these worker owners really engaged within their community there. So I don't know if I exactly got to what you were saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think you did. And then one other question that I had is, I know you're very interested in the larger kind of corporate social responsibility, sustainable business. And do you have any thoughts, having looked at different models of sustainable business and kind of socially responsible business, kind of how you see co-ops fitting into that framework, or sort of in parallel to that framework, or what are your thoughts on that kind of like their place in that larger landscape?
Yeah, sure. As you know, I'm definitely very interested in the B Corp movement as well. I think that co-ops, the way I see it, is a very large subset of this movement to use business as a force for good, as the B Corp movement says. Part of their impact assessment actually looks at the ownership structures and kind of working towards employee ownership as one of the ultimate goals. So there's definitely already some overlap built in between the B Corp movement and the cooperative movement. I think one piece is, though cooperatives innately have a very social mission, they don't necessarily have a built-in environmental mission as well. I think a lot of times that does end up going hand in hand, but that is one piece where I think the B Corp movement is a little more widely encompassing, that they really identify some areas and some metrics to measure your environmental impact. I think looking at tools and frameworks wise, I think cooperations are a really good structure, and I think the B Corp movement creates a lot of really good measurement tools. to measure progress. So I think those two together really work together to complement each other very well.
And maybe as a final question, just kind of looking back over the course of the last semester, as you've kind of learned and dug deep into the co-op model, were there any particular things that sort of surprised you, or were kind of substantially different from kind of other things that you'd learned as you were kind of studying business and entrepreneurship and that sort of things that really kind of popped or stuck with you?
Yeah, pretty much everything. I mean, I went into this really having had virtually no idea what a cooperative was. The name sounded nice. I like cooperation. But I had heard Steve Voigt speaking about King Arthur Flour, which has employee stock ownership program, but they also have some democratic management techniques. And it was kind of that democratic management of empowering the employees and really creating that quality of life for employees at the companies that motivated me to get into this. So looking at democratic management structures was that initial impetus, but then working with you, who you're, I know, very interested in the financing, and with the guest speakers that came in and talked about all these different topics, I was surprised how interested I got in this broader picture of cooperative economies and how to finance them, and how to build these regional economies and alliances. Yeah, so those were definitely a few big takeaways.
Cool. Well, before we wrap up and sign off, any sort of final reflections on the experience or things that have been left unsaid?
I mean, as much as I tried to cram a whole bunch into that presentation, I do feel like I was only able to skate over some very surface level things. I think with your guidance, I really did learn an incredible amount this semester, but at the same time, have a long way to go and have just gotten enough of the bug that I am going to be looking for other opportunities to really dive into this cooperative movement, learn more, and help build it. So if anyone's out there watching and is interested in building some sort of connections and collaborating, let me know.
Awesome. Well, thanks for all your work and interest this semester. And with that, we shall sign off. But keep an eye on the Cooperative Vermont YouTube channel, and we'll be hopefully having more of these Google Hangout conversations going forward. Now that we've been kind of inspired through this project to get it going. So, all right.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Adios.